All right, there, outliers. Niiamah Ashong here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey. We have today a tantalizing and titillating. That's what's going on through my mind. Tantalizing and titillating conversation on the horizon with three incredible outliers who are going to share how they continue to level up their game, especially when it comes to their impact, their income, and their identity. Why don't we give you all a chance to get to know these outliers here today? Laura, let's start with you. Would you mind sharing with us more about you and the game that you're currently playing?
Sure. My name is Laura Erdman-Luntz, and I've been a life coach and yoga educator and wellness advocate for over 30 years. I've done it full time for my entire career. I inspire people to live their extraordinary life. So really to tap into what's in their heart of hearts, what they really just want their life to look like, and not only help them figure it out, but then take the path to get there. So, and I do that through their minds and through coaching, through their bodies with yoga and adding wellness on top of it to give them the energy to do it. Is there any more you want me to add to that?
I think we'll keep growing as the conversation goes in. Like what I like about you, Lars, like I get that there is a lot more, right? Like you come off as like brimming with both possibility and like an energy and also experience. So like I appreciate you. And we'll see where things go from here.
Well, you also did add that you want me to say yet what I'm doing personally to
Yeah,
level
if you
up?
yeah, well, I will bring it in. I'll ask some questions around that in just a bit. I like that. I like that.
You
Thanks,
got it.
Laura. Jerry, how about you? Let us know more about you and the game you're currently playing.
Okay, so the game I seem to always be playing is pickup sticks. I have this like mess on the floor and I'm trying to pick up pieces. I sort of stumbled into everything I do. But uh, so I became a certified personal trainer and a nutrition coach back in the 90s and uh, went back to school at some point and got a master's and a doctorate in psychology and became a psychologist. Um, And then a few years back, I had some family situation that required me to stop working and be a little more available for my kids. And I realized that I had more of a love for helping people thrive than for treating mental health conditions. You know, sort of when you treat mental health conditions, you sort of take people who are suffering and bring them up to baseline. And I kind of like taking people at baseline and helping them thrive. So while I was home from work, um, I just tried to keep myself busy and I started a podcast and I did some coaching and I found this love for that. So, what am I doing to level up? Well, at the moment, this podcast. Aside from that, I'm not exactly sure because it's all been serendipity up until now. So I'm working on a plan.
I like that. We'll keep playing with that as time goes in here. All right. Thank you so much, Jerry. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you do the work you do.
Thank you.
Claire, we'd love to get to know you. Would you mind sharing more about you and the game you're playing?
Absolutely. So currently, I'm playing multiple games. I've gone back to university to do my master's degree in political communication because I think at the heart of all work that I do, it's really about communicating with people for impact and transformation. So, a couple of years ago, I started doing this through my podcast, which is also about psychology and sharing personal stories and really how we can apply psychological theories to our everyday lives to see differences and just to understand ourselves better. I'm also working for a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company where I'm a writer and a researcher. And I also just love to write personal evolution stories just through letters that other people want to read and that are just like personal to me. And that's my creative practice of being able to share. And I just find that when we're able to be vulnerable with ourselves, it really inspires other people to do the same thing and feel less shame about who they are and what they experience. And yeah, I think that's really at the heart of what drives all the ventures and things that I take on.
Well, I'm glad that you keep venturing onwards, Claire, and that you keep finding ways to level up your skills to do that. I'm excited to see how we all play here to get together today. So with that being said, Laura, earlier you brought in, you're like, hey, are we going to talk about like how I'm leveling up right now? Um, I got really excited when you did that. I was like, let's go and get a round of introductions in. But I am really curious around like what you're bringing into your world right now to level up. And what the way I'll do this here is I'll toss this in right now for us, and everyone can get a chance to respond to it. I'll be on mute. You just like you let the conversation evolve, and if I need to, I'll bring in another one. But Laura, let's start off with you in that one. Like, what are you doing right now that's leveling you up?
So, so as a life coach and focusing on helping people live their extraordinary lives, I've always been really focused on what are your goals? What's your vision? How can we set goals? How can we get you there? And in the last couple of years, I feel like what Jerry said is like I'm trying to slip more into what happens serendipitously, because I really do follow law of attraction, manifesting guidelines. You know, you get into the feeling of what you want and things will come your way. So my own personal leveling up, I still do enjoy goal setting for myself and getting that excitement in my own life going, because I also know that the status quo of our life is very alluring, right? Just to settle into what we've always had and just having the same morning every day, having the same Monday every week. And we need goals in order to get out of that, but also to begin to step into what happens serendipitously, what's coming my way, what's intuitively, what am I feeling? And I'm leaning much more into that now than I ever have before. So finding that balance and helping my clients find that balance, I think it's really interesting, because some people only go serendipitously and sometimes they follow it, but more often than not, they let life, you know, guide their way, especially if they haven't had, you know, experience, if you will, in the personal growth world. Um, or they're big goal setters. And I feel like there's a balance. Like we have to figure out where it is that we can ride a little bit of both. Because the problem with, you know, firm goal setting is you get blinders and better things come along, but you don't see them because you've got this one goal that you are going toward, you know, and you're missing everything else. So my level up for 2025 in particular is to really tap into serendipity and letting things come my way and not be too fixated on those goals. They're like soft intentions rather than hard and fast deadlines. Anyone want to follow
Yeah.
up with
So like
Absolutely.
it's cool. This podcast becomes really fun for me. An outlier. So what you just heard there, you heard some silence. I leave the silence and stuff in there. It becomes fun for me because I get to do a couple different things. One, I get to practice silence. One of the things I find is like as someone that plays the game that all three of us are playing, it's like our ability to be with silence and be in the discomfort of that is really important. So you're seeing outliers or listening to some of this happen in real time without just like the need to fill up things. And I think at the same time, we can all be very patient as time goes on too. I'm gonna put something in here, and then Claire, I saw you as well. I was starting to smile when you sort of talking, Laura. Like my smile kept growing, mainly because I think you're talking about what feels like my big like dirty secret right now, which is like I used to be very serendipitous and just like walk through life. I just have like a complete open aura to me. And then in the last 2 years, I'm like, no, like my second child has been born. Like we need to figure these things out. Like no more like ups and downs. Like you just need to get to like a place of being solid. Hardest, like I would say, like not hardest, but like very painful. Like overall in that experience, which feels more like the goal setting type of way of going about it. And so it's getting me right now where I'm trying to figure out what does that balance look like for me, and like how do I what does that look like? Am I giving up on the last 2 years if I don't get to the quote unquote goal first and I take on the serendipity, like more element of that now? I'll talk a lot about like masculine and feminine and like goals and intuition and so on and so forth. And just like swirling in like, what is that combo? What does that dance look like to
that?
make that come to life? So I needed to call out like as you were saying, I was like, oh, this is so me right now. This is so painfully me.
So we're sort of opposites. I've been goal oriented and now I'm trying to soften it, and you've been soft and you're trying to just create a little bit more structure. And
Yeah.
it's just, I really do think there's that balance. That balance is the most beautiful place to be. You know, I personally set goals for a year. Where do I want to be a year from now? And then I break it up by quarter. And then I look at each quarter individually, because that way it allows me every quarter to review. Like, has something better come along? Is this really where I want to be at the end of the year anymore? You know, it just allows that serendipity, that softness, that soft intention into the mix while still having my goals. So I'm still going someplace, you know, driving someplace.
I feel more at ease hearing that. Let's see how it came up for everyone else. Claire, do you have any thoughts on this, or like the original question around how you're playing, how you're leveling up right now?
Absolutely. I think it's, for me, a little bit of both of what you said. So this year has been particularly difficult for me because I've dealt with a lot of grief and a lot of loss in my life. And I think in that sense, I've become, and the way that I'm trying to level up at the moment is being very, setting the hard goals on what self-care looks like, on taking care of myself, on eating 3 meals a day, on doing exercise, doing yoga, going to sleep on time. And then the serendipity comes in, like, once you're already taking care of yourself and you're at that baseline level that you were talking about, Jerry, then there's the magic and like the things that level up, that level you up. And I think what I chase in those moments a lot is that just really embracing the discomfort of embarrassment, of doing things where you're not brilliant at doing the first time or the second time or the third time, but still being courageous enough to sit in that embarrassment of trying something new, to allow it to teach you something, to allow it to let you grow in that arena. So being very soft on myself with like the embarrassment and finding things that come like authentically and just popping out of thin air, but then being very strict on the self-care and taking care of myself.
Yeah, I think so, Claire, what you're talking about is a growth mindset, the willingness to not be good at something. It's one of the main key tools for thriving. But it's funny. So my situation is a little more similar to Niiamah's because, um, like I said, I didn't start with the intention of like, well, let's start a coaching business. Um, I just sort of, I wasn't working and I was trying to keep myself occupied and did a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Um, and so my struggle is, is that balance that Laura was talking about, because while I value intuition and I value patience and I value letting the universe guide you. And I am a classic overthinker and rely probably too much on my intellect, which sometimes results in trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Um, and so and so a lot of what I've produced, which led into a coaching business, was through serendipity. It was just keeping myself occupied while I was at home. So I started a blog for a while, which was sort of humorous and just about my life and kind of um, how the parts don't really fit together. Um, but then I started a newsletter that's really fitness oriented and nutrition oriented through LinkedIn. And I was doing an article there like once a month. Um, and then I had this podcast, which it covered a lot of different things. It covered sort of financial wellness and um, and fitness pieces, but it was probably mostly primarily focused on the psychological tools of thriving, on gratitude and growth mindset and meaning making and things of that sort. And what I'm trying to do now is achieve that balance that Laura was talking about. I believe that there's value in each of these things I have produced. And I've been lucky enough to pick up some clients, and some high level clients. I've worked with some high level competitive athletes and some executives. Um, and some, and some regular folks who are trying to figure out their relationships and things like that too. So I've been very lucky and blessed in that regard. But I guess my point is I have each of these resources that I didn't start them with a plan of like going from A to B to C, but now they're all out there. And I'm trying to figure out how to unify them into something that is sort of holistic and includes the value, sort of optimizes the value in each of them. Um, but I'm trying not to use the intellect to force it. I'm trying to sort of balance the intellect of how do I package these things and market them with the serendipitous or intuitive piece of like, how do I let them be what they are and just, I don't know. Joe Rogan does it, right? Like his podcast is about everything. It's about nothing and everything, and somehow manages to make it happen. So that's where I am. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'll I'll pause.
I like this. Yeah, we'll go down to like commas and periods as it goes through, but I also like to give people space um, to say what's real, right? To
Yeah.
say what's real for them. Um, I am I'm curious here. Uh, Claire brought up something. She said the discomfort of embarrassment, and I get really curious because now, Laura, like I have this frame of the serendipitous versus and the goal setting, and I'm like I'm trying to navigate that, and I'm thinking about this about the discomfort from the discomfort of embarrassment side of things. And what was really interesting was like Claire, you started going like it might not take one time, it may not take two times, maybe even three times. And what really came up for me was like I was like, what are your relationship to volume? Like how much embarrassment can you take? What if it doesn't take, what if it takes 50 times? What if it takes 100 times, what if you get some results early, and it's like, well, this is just like, yeah, it's not flattering, but it's not necessarily embarrassing yet. Like, I'm really curious about like how y'all navigate it before y'all look good, And I say this, I'm quote unquote asking for a friend, but at the same time, there's at least two or three projects right now that I'm thinking about in my life, right, where I'm just like, doing a lot of volume on this to try and like to like how much embarrassment can I stomach around this? How much discomfort can I stomach? And we use the words embarrassment, discomfort. They may not be your words, but I love to just like open a conversation here around this. What do y'all think about that?
I'd like to throw in that I once heard Jack Canfield speak, and he talked about he was the creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which went on to become the best-selling series of all times, I believe, until Harry Potter came along. And he was turned down by 162 publishers. 162 and kept going. And I really thought about that because I was like, if I went to five, I've written 4 books, but I've self-published all of them. And it's like, if I went to 5 publishers and got no's, I'd be disheartened, much less 150. And it's because it was cutting edge. They said nobody wants short stories, short snippets of true stories, not even short stories, but not fictional. It was like nobody wants this. It was the first of its kind, and it started a whole trend. I mean, that's what people read now, right? And we even have short videos. And it's something that really, really stuck with me. But another thing I got from a friend that I really loved, I was really struggling with something. It just felt like the universe was putting up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I was talking to a friend and I said, am I supposed to do it? And he said something really great. He said, do you see that? I don't even remember what it was. Do you see that as part of your future? That part, that thing, is it something that you want 5, 10, 15 years from now? Is it something that you want in your life? Is this part of your path? And I thought that is a great question, because is the universe putting in roadblocks because I'm not supposed to do it, or because I need to evolve and grow and get through them so I can be strong enough for whatever that is? And I knew right then, I knew this is something that I wanted to have in my life. And I just doubled down and I dug in and I did it. I got it done. But I think that for me, it's not as much embarrassment as it is the difficulty. I don't embarrass super easily. I just kind of Because for me, I feel like when I don't do something really, really well, it gives other people permission to not do it well too. And it's like, I don't care. I make mistakes on my YouTube videos. I just keep going. It's like I laugh it off and keep going. But obstacles can stop me in an instant. And so thinking about whether or not it's something I really, really want is a really helpful tool.
Yeah. I think another strategy that I find useful um, is whether I focus on, the question was, how do you handle that embarrassment until you're good? And the view is very different for me anyway. When I'm worried about good than it is when I'm worried about better than yesterday. So, because I mean, I don't know about you folks, but for me, I don't ever achieve good at anything. I'm never at the point where I'm like, yep, that's it. I'm good. Like, yeah, and it seems to me that the more I learn about anything, um, I just become acutely aware of how much more I don't know. You know, I mean, one of the worst things was getting a doctorate in psychology because I came out of a doctorate in psychology feeling like I knew way less than I did when I had a bachelor's degree, right? Because I just know how much is out there. So if I look at, did I do it better than yesterday? You know, I'm a huge music buff. I love music and I love to play music. I also love to sing. I'm awful at it, but I love love to sing. And if I, worry about am I good enough to sing at Carnegie Hall, I'm going to be forever disappointed. But if I worry about am I better than I was yesterday, I can usually feel pretty good about the progress. So.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to Jerry about the love for music. So something that I started doing this year was, and this is just like creatively with the like among my friends, and then maybe at some small bars, was also just starting to DJ. And this is where I was really like, oh, the embarrassment of not being as good as you want to be really gets you when you're in a public place and people are watching you do this. And yes, as long as I'm a little bit better than yesterday and that I can find joy in the process of creating and doing it, then the embarrassment becomes a little bit more, it becomes easier to sit with. Because then it's like, am I having a good time while I'm doing this? What am I allowing myself to express myself creatively? And I really love the question your friend brought up, Laura, and I just had to write it down in my journal of like, do you see this as a part of your future? I think that's great for contextualizing some big things to be able to get through the embarrassment or the discomfort of roadblocks. And yeah, the embarrassment, it will always be somewhat embarrassing to make a mistake or not be perfect. But yeah, like you said, when you don't do things perfectly, you give other people the permission just to also show up as themselves and practice and be creative and allow the process and not just the final destination of something.
That's the paradox of the flow state, right? Is like nothing about getting into a flow state has to do with how good you are at a thing. And yet the people who can sort of turn off their brains a little bit and get into the flow state tend to be the best at the things they do. So, and I imagine DJing falls into that, right? Like the folks who are when you're concerned about being good enough, it sort of prevents you from getting into the state that's going to progress you into being good enough.
Definitely. I made a mix the other day while I was in bed, and I felt really like I was like, this is brilliant. I sent it to like one of my friends, where I listened back to it the next day. I was like, this is actually not good. This doesn't sound very smooth at all. But then just being in that state where you're enjoying something and feeling like in the flow of it encourages you to practice more because you enjoy the process of making something. So yeah, that's definitely spot on.
When we're in the flow, we're definitely channeling a whole different thing. And I think finding those things where we're allowed to get into the flow is so powerful. So powerful.
It reminds me of I mean, I've heard so many iterations of this parable, And I don't know if it was ever a true story, but I've heard it as the Dalai Lama, I've heard it as the Pope, I've heard it as just a wise man, but this story where um, the kid is asking the whatever the clergy person or the wise elder for guidance on what he should do for a career. And the elder says, well, what makes you come alive? Because the world doesn't need more financially successful people. The world needs more people who come alive. So
I appreciate y'all. I appreciate this part of the conversation here. Um, there's there's that component of like the journey over the destination that I'm hearing in here as well. It's very funny for me because like uh I'm like Laura in the sense of like embarrassment. I probably used that word more times in this last 15 minutes of conversation than I have in the last 15 years, you know. But there's a component of this of doing something that is different, of stepping out and bringing to life something that either you have never done before or you haven't seen done before, or perhaps you're like, oh, it definitely gets done, but like out there, but like, who am I to go and do it? Right. I like right now in my business, I'm facing that right now where I realize like, oh, it's probably time for me to go and hire a sales team. And I'm like, what? But I'm a coach. Like, shouldn't I just be doing one sales call? Like, shouldn't I be having the enrollment calls myself? I'm like this is something that a company does, and I'm running into that discomfort as it comes along. So I appreciate you all like playing with this here. Laura, I'm thinking about you when you talk about like creating it, like you help people create extraordinary lives, and I'm curious now. This one I'm going to frame it here. I'm curious about the cost for you, right? So as each of you are out there creating your extraordinary lives, what's been one of like the hidden costs that people see? They get to see you right now on the podcast. They get to listen to your voice right here, right now, and you are all up to you're up to your own big things. But I have found that oftentimes there's something else that most people didn't know was required or that you had to pay in order to get here. And it's probably like the financial part is probably the easiest part of it all. So I'm curious if y'all wouldn't mind talking about some of the hidden costs or the hidden investments that you had to make in order to play at the level you're playing right now.
I will say that I'm not exactly sure because definitely there's the financial, right? You have to commit to something you're not going to get paid for a long time. I'm used to that. I've been an entrepreneur my whole career, but that can be tricky for new people coming into it. One of the things that was really challenging for me is the feeling like I'm not good enough for things. So it's funny when Jerry said, I feel like I'm not good at something, I thought, I had to really work on being able to finally say, wait, no, I am good at that. I am a really good coach. I am a really good yoga teacher. I taught yoga teachers for 20 years at the beginning advanced level. And it took me a long time to feel like I was good enough to do it, but I had to do it because I owned a studio. I was pregnant. I had no teachers to take over. and um, and I ended up having the first yoga teacher training in the state of Minnesota, and it built really big. But it still didn't feel like I was good enough. There was always that imposter syndrome going on. So it was something that I had to constantly work on that next thing. It's like I'm not ready for it, but the universe kept throwing me into it. Like I don't have a choice. Like I am gonna have a baby. Someone has to teach these classes. And I loved that because I was forced into it, and now I intentionally go into it because that next thing, like you were saying, I have to hire a marketing team. That's so out of my comfort zone. Yeah, and it's a part of my bigger picture, so it's time to step out of that comfort zone.
yeah, I'm trying to frame my thought as a cost more than a challenge.
That's fine.
Uh,
And if challenge is what's working for you, let's go with it. I just want to like give some components of like
right.
what, yeah, good. Speak to
Yeah.
what's coming to you there, Jerry.
So I mean the challenge. So I'm starting to put it together. The challenge is similar to what Lauren said. There's a couple of things. Like when I was writing and I'm probably going to rekindle a lot of these efforts and just force myself to do them and see, because I talked about not seeing quite how they fit together. And I think I'm just going to force myself to keep doing them until they start to merge together some way, until I kind of organically figure it out. But there's an element every time I go to write an article or record a podcast of like, why would anybody want to listen to me? Like, well, why would anybody want to hear what I like? Um, and there's also an element of, I grew up, you can tell from my gray hair, I grew up in the 80s. And, I was raised on this narrative of like, you go to work for some company and you stay there 35 years or so until you get the gold watch and you retire and you have a pension. And that's not the world anymore, but it feels, I don't know, it feels like some sort of violation or, like I don't know, breaking the rules sometimes or being, even though I'm working sometimes harder than I would in that environment, it feels like I'm being lazy, right? The critic in my head is telling me that I'm being lazy. And so those are the challenges. I think the cost is I had to do a lot of the work maybe before I anticipated doing the work, right? Like I couldn't take the nice leisurely therapy route that covers years and years until I kind of feel like, oh, I've reached it. And it's like, no, if I really want to do this, I need to embrace discomfort. I need to, not care if nobody listens, right? If the first 150 editors, reject me, I have to just put the content out there and do it. And so I think the cost was doing a lot of that work, that internal work, and getting over a lot of that inertia and little demons of doubt before I was ready, or before I felt ready. Maybe I was ready, but I certainly didn't feel ready.
I see you there, Jerry. Claire, Laura, anything coming to y'all on this?
Yeah, I wanted to share, yeah, I first of all deeply resonate with that feeling of just, is anybody gonna want to listen to this? Like, am I ready? Like, should I really be the one doing this? It's a huge cost to have to overcome that self-doubt, and build that self-belief. And to that, I just wanted to add that I think some of the costs that I've had to pay, is that I feel like I've not often had a lot of stability in my life. So from quite a young age, I decided that I wanted to go to a boarding school that was in a different country and then go to university in a different place, and just like this constant moving around, going to new environments where I thought that would be the best opportunity for me, and the best program or the best access to resources. Really, I feel like that cost me a lot of time spent with my family or time spent with my friends or time spent in my home city, that I feel like that was a huge loss for me, not being able to have a lot of those things while I was growing up and just being a young adult. And I feel like I found ways to come back to it now. But then sometimes it feels like at my age, like returning to my home city for the first time as an adult, being like, these are all the experiences that I never got to have that people were having 5 years ago. Or just spending time with my family that twice a year, when I return from being abroad, and that just being a huge loss. But then, yeah, needing to do those things to go to those places where I felt like I was going to grow the most, which is just, it's the it's a sad thing to realize, but I never actually had this articulated until you asked me this question of like, what has it taken to get to this place?
I appreciate that, Laura. I see you. Before I come to you real quick, Laura, I want to just go to outliers. Outliers, as we're having this conversation, like join us in the conversation. You may not be here right now to have this here, but like, take some time to think about some of the costs that come in, or take some time to think through some of these questions. There are none of these things. Y'all know me. Like I'm super positive and I'm a huge optimist. But like I think I'm a realist. Actually, that's the way I like to play. Which like there's a lot of positive that goes out, and with that positive, there's also like some things that it takes in order to make that come to life. And I think that I don't know, I feel like I've been marketed to for several years that like if it hurts even a little bit, you're doing the wrong thing. If you're not succeeding right away, you're out of your joy. Like it's like, oh man, how do you navigate those messages when the reality of my experience, at least, has been that like a lot of good things have happened, and some of them have also taken some work. So I want to put that in there and talk to you outliers here. Laura, I see you unmuted, so please bring what you have.
Well, I was going to say with Claire, it's interesting because you had those costs, but then for someone like me, I stayed at home for high school. My cost was I didn't have the international experience. I did it in college, but you know what I mean? It's like I feel like, and what you were just saying too is that we all have our own path, and we all have the things that are going to be easy for us. We all have the things that are going to be hard for us, and navigating the lessons so that we can actually learn from them. And when things happen that are we would consider bad, are they really bad, or are we being guided to do something else and to take a different path? And this is the easiest way to do it, or we wouldn't have done it if this bad thing wouldn't have happened. So is it truly bad, or is even the bad stuff serendipity because it's taking us where we need to be? And I feel like if we see everything as something done for us and not to us, it's an opportunity to really evolve and grow and get even bigger, live an even more authentic life and what we're supposed to truly be doing.
I appreciate that, Laura. Like, I asked this question not to live in negativity. I promise you that. I love this component of it all because I might use the word cost because like I don't know how to like frame it in another way, but I love to see what people have done before the I like to think investment, but before the returns came back to them, and so I appreciate you anchoring us in like there's a point to this here. There's a reason why we're examining this question right now. We're about to start wrapping up for today. Um, Jerry, you brought in something that I personally would just be really curious about where the what like you all think about on this. And that is you brought in about like you have a bunch of things that you've done over your lifetime. There's a bunch of things that you've done for the business and for yourself, but you're like, I'm not seeing how they all fit together, and that was something that was actually really curious for me. And I think it added a different nuance to that whole goal versus serendipity component, because the serendipity part for me was like if I do it, they will come however that is, and then the goal part is like, hey, they're not coming. Should I be like should I be doing something different? Like what if I just like try to get them to come this time around? So I'm really curious how you all like navigate this might be a shorter part of the conversation, but I'm curious how you all see like like what that blend looks like for you. Jerry, what came to me when you were saying it was like nowadays I've been really looking to see how do I create bridges between the different things that I'm doing, and in particular, calls to action. Like, am I being forthcoming with calls to action and saying like, hey, if you're going to take an action, this is the action I would most like you to take, and then make sure that they can go there, knowing that the serendipity is still going to be like serendipity is still going to play its game. I just have to like, I might just benefit from nudging them in a direction or something. I'm deeply curious what you all have to say. You may have nothing to say on this one. If that's the case, we'll move on to something else. But I do want to bring this back into this space.
Yeah, I'm struggling to, I mean, I'm wholly confused on the um the bridges, I think I like the field of dreams. If I build it, they will come, right? Like if I build those bridges, but um I have this battle, this war between the intellect and the intuit, and whether I noodle it out and figure it out, or whether I just keep producing and see how it all starts to tie together. So I I really don't have anything of value to add there. I will say I find it way easier to help other people with it than to do it for
Mm.
me. The view is very different when you're on the shore. Like when you're out on the shore looking out at the ocean, it's beautiful. When you're in the ocean drowning, it's really hard to appreciate the beauty.
It's so funny you say that because when I'm working with my own life coach, she'll say, "What would you say if one of your clients came to you with this issue?" And I always have an answer. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I'll even say, "Oh yeah, there it is," right? And she's
Yeah.
like, "I'm just saying." It's like we have answers for others, but to see it for ourselves can be very tricky. And that's why we all need our village,
Yeah.
right? We all need our village.
Well, I appreciate you all here joining the village for now. We're about to wrap up the conversation. I want to wrap up in two ways. One, I'm going to ask you all one more question. Um, and this question here is really around like a project that you're taking on that's having you lean into your edge right now. So if you don't mind sharing with us like something that you're taking on, maybe it's a vision you have, a specific project, or a way of being that has you basically having sweaty palms. This is the edge part where it's like we don't know how it's going to look yet, but we're still in the middle of it and we're going for it. Laura, I saw you unmuted, but do you mind kicking us off?
I do not mind at all because I will tell you that going with the flow and following serendipity is totally my uncomfort zone. It's my discomfort 100%. I am all about New Year's resolutions. I love them. It is my time of year. I come alive. It's my high holiday. I set goals. I help other people do it. I have my word of the year. I do all of that. And I'm doing it still, but lightly. And it's like it's so uncomfortable for me in a good way. Like I know it's the right thing to not be like I'm going to do this and this and this and this. It's like no, this is the general direction I'm going to go, but I'm keeping my peripheral vision open because I'm not sure. I feel like my career is at a transit, it's at a crossroads. And I know I'm doing the right thing, but it's like where I focus because I'm like Jerry, I've got 17 different things and they all feel disparate, but they aren't. They all have the soul is the same. That extraordinary life is the same. It comes from that same root, but it's like, how do they fit together? Where should I be focused? I'm just going to let it go and just be present with it. And I'm sweating. The palms are wet.
Thanks, Laura. Claire, you got one on this one?
Do I? I think just going into the next year, really thinking about writing my master's thesis, using a like research method that I've never used before, because there were some let's say there were some institutional restrictions that pushed me to go in a direction that I wouldn't have normally chosen. And so, yeah, just being able to do something new, write about something new, and take on just a really big project is making my palms sweat, definitely. Um, and just yeah, allowing myself, I think on top of that is just allowing myself to evolve and change. Like I think in doing so many different things, sometimes it's really um difficult to allow yourself that space to evolve and change because people are like, well, I knew you as this person, this is how you were previously presenting yourself, and then to show up, like rebranded and in a different direction, can is also really uncomfortable to be like, well, now I'm doing this is the pivot that I made and the new direction that I'm going into. So just allowing myself to change and show up as authentically as I am today and not feel judged or ashamed when other people are asking me, but what about the other things that you used to be doing? So those two things, just like starting something new and allowing myself to change, um, and be myself and present currently.
Well, I appreciate that there here. We're gonna wrap up this conversation overall right now. The way that we do this is in twofold. One, I'm gonna ask outliers here. Outliers, like we just had a great conversation here with three incredible people who are sharing their journey. And honestly, one of the things I really appreciate about y'all is that like y'all are not pretending you have it all figured out, which is lovely to be in space with, right? You're doing big things out in the world. And at the same time, you're still also allowing yourself to like be like, and I'm growing and I'm figuring and this is what's happening on the inside as well. So thank you for that. Outliers, like please, my ask is this feel free share this on all your platforms, make as many people as you know about this episode. That'd be wonderful. I think I really am proud of the conversation that we've had here today, and I'd like to invite you to come join us in our one person one conversation at a time initiative, where we simply take this conversation and you find one person in your life who you feel would benefit from it. Maybe they're going through that serendipity, goal setting kind of balance, or they're afraid of the discomfort of embarrassment, or any of the other things that showed up in this conversation. And you can just let them know, like, hey, I was thinking about you today, and I heard this episode, and I thought it'd be really perfect for you to just take a listen. There's something in my mind that like underneath all the other work we can do, this gets to like the heart of people. I love to give room for that, right? So if you don't mind sharing it in that way, and just giving the gift of this conversation to someone, that would mean the absolute world to me. All right. So Laura, Jerry, Claire, we're wrapping up here today. What I want to do is make sure that outliers have a way to continue down the journey with you. So if you don't mind, can you please share your best means of contact here, and then let us know about an insight that you got from this conversation. The thing is, outliers, they're done. You don't have to frame it in a bowl for them what they should take away from this. They're covered. But what's something that you're walking away from this conversation with, if anything at all? Right. So why don't we start with Claire? Claire, would you mind sharing with us an insight that you got from this conversation, if any, as well as your best contact info?
Yeah, so I would just have to go back to that question that Laura brought up, which was like, do you see that as a part of your future? I think sometimes I'm really living in the year to year, semesters to semester, month to month mindset, but just having a bigger overall goal and image, an idea about what you want your life to look like, I think is a question that I wrote down and just want to reflect on more. So that's one of my insights. And if people want to continue in the conversation or write to me, I always love hearing from anybody. The best way to do that would be on my Instagram, and that is Adamson_Claire. And you can also check out my podcast, which is called Clarification on Spotify. And next year, we're going to be making more episodes and having different conversations and just evolving, as I said. Yeah, so thank you so much for your time and just sharing all these insights. I really learned a lot today, guys.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for being here. Laura, let's come to you. If you mind sharing your insight and your best contact info for us.
Yeah, I felt like that conversation between serendipity that Jerry brought up and then goal setting, I liked hearing the other side of it. I hadn't actually considered the other side, and I realized that, we're all kind of finding that balance in the middle, and that helped me clarify it for myself even more. The best way to find me is my podcast, Ignite Your Life, and it is on all platforms. And I also do the video format on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, where I also have yoga classes and where I combine life coaching and yoga on the yoga mat. So you might want to come check that out as well.
Thanks for that. I love that, like that juxtaposition together here. Thank you for playing the game you play, Laura. It's been really fun being in space with you.
It's been great. I'm so glad you did this.
And then Jerry, let us know about an insight that you're taking away from here, and then the best way to contact you.
So the insight is not new, but it's an important reminder, something that comes up again and again. And Niiamah, you talked about the being fed the message about, like, if something hurts, you shouldn't do it, or if it's hard, you should move on, or it's a sign that, and all of us, I mean, everyone, Claire and Laura both talked about, and me talked about, sort of, we're doing this thing, but we're all struggling with different areas, with uncertainties, with seeing the big picture, with, and so I think the insight is to remember what's marketing and what's reality. And I think the idea that if it hurts, you shouldn't do it, or everything should be comfortable, or if you get 125 rejections, you're doing the wrong thing, is marketing. That's messaging that people use to sell you things. Reality is, if you do what makes you come alive, if you do what what's in your heart, you'll create. If you don't find it, you'll create your audience. So I think that's my insight, is to just remember that narrative is marketing, and to just keep digging, keep trudging away. The way to get in touch with me, so I also have a podcast. and it's called the Growth and Thriving Podcast. It's available on all platforms or most platforms. If you want to reach me, I'd love that. Instagram works. It's biker_psychologist. And I mean, I have email and other things as well, but those are probably the best ways. And I would love to hear from people. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for letting us hear your thoughts, and for being real about like whereabouts y'all are. It's always nice when I can join the conversation. Be like, hey, like y'all are going through this here. This is it. I appreciate you playing this game as peers. Is what I'm really getting at. All right, thank you for playing the game that you play. And Outliers, remember this until the next time we talk. Be you on purpose. Journey on.